constantly told you multiple times that that organ called the gut, the tube that moves from the mouth to the anus, that is a very important tube there. And the reason why that tube is there is because it's actually going to protect you. It is one of your immune systems. It's part of your immune systems. So when I tell you to fix the gut and you're wondering, why should I fix the gut? Like, what is so important about this gut that I, Lewis, have to fix just because you, Dr. Lewis, has come out with an idea that people have to fix their guts? What is the gut in the first place? The gut is that tube, about 8 meters or so from the mouth all the way to the anus. That tube has a lot of things. Number one, in your mouth, you have saliva. The saliva in your mouth has enzymes, it has immunoglobulins, the immune cells, of course. It has proteins, it has all this. It even has painkillers. And actually, there's a component in the saliva that is as potent as morphine. This is the reason why when you bite yourself, you don't feel pain so much. You just feel pain, pop, once you bite yourself. And after that, you're good to go. And again, the healing process comes in because we have the cells for immunity in your mouth, and they come in and rejuvenate. And also the buccal cells, the cells that line the mouth, are actually epithelial cells that are rapidly multiplying. When I mention the word rapidly multiplying, I want you to always remember that when you're going for chemotherapy, basically cancer chemotherapy, because chemotherapy can actually mean antibiotics also. So when you're going for cancer chemotherapy, remember that that chemotherapy targets rapidly multiplying cells. Now, you've said in your mouth you have rapidly multiplying epithelial cells that line the mouth. So if you have a chemotherapeutic agent that is targeting rapidly multiplying cells, that means that agent is going to cause you side effects like oral ulcers. So they always have mouth ulcers. That's why even their mouth starts to turn pink. You've seen that? Okay, so understand that. Also, other rapidly multiplying cells are the ones that line the gut wall, are the ones that actually line the gonads in the testicles and in the ovaries, are the ones that actually are in the bone marrow. So all the side effects of chemotherapeutic cancer agents, I call them cancer agents because I don't want to generalize chemotherapy. So those cancer agents that actually are supposed to treat cancer, they end up destroying these rapidly multiplying cells. That's why we end up having gastric ulcers, the mouth ulcers. We have skin problems because also the skin is rapidly multiplying and rejuvenating. We have gonads because the sperm cells, the ovaries are actually producing a lot of cells that are rapidly multiplying. And therefore, when you suppress the growth of cancer, you end up suppressing these rapidly multiplying cells without even wanting to. That's why chemo can actually expose you to more problems. Actually, it exposes people to more problems than it actually solves, given that it also causes cancer. So yeah, you can do your maths. Can you prevent cancer, or can you go ahead and get it and now you can treat it? Choose you. So yeah, so it's your mouth is lined by those rapidly multiplying epithelial cells. We have the saliva that has all these antibodies. It has all the immune cells. It has all the mucus, it has fluids, the water, it has salts. So it's a very rich fluid that we take for granted. We even exchange it. So we've taken saliva so much casual that now we are exchanging saliva. But I want you to also understand, in your mouth, we have a lot of bacteria. We have a lot of microorganisms. And if any case, the number of microorganisms in your mouth are so many, they are even exceeding the amount of bacteria that line your toilet seat. Those of you who still sit on the crown when you're going to release the toxins. So yes, so there's a lot of bacteria in your mouth, and these bacteria, both good and bad bacteria, and these bacteria have to be protected by all means. When we talked about the oral hygiene earlier on, we talked about how the commercial toothpaste, we talked about how the mouthwash that you people use, the one that starts with L, it has alcohol, and alcohol comes in to clear all these good and bad bacteria, and then now messes up your bacterial environment in the mouth. That can be very detrimental to your health. So remember, those bacteria are not there for fun. They are there as part of your immune system. So in your mouth, you have all this immunity. So by the time any microorganism is getting into your stomach, already it has actually been super, and then it has overpowered your first layer, which is the saliva. And we are talking about this because we are going to relate this to typhoid, which is Salmonella typhi, and also to brucellosis, which is a group of microorganisms that actually cause the brucella disease. Okay, so this is a problem. So when they exceed the immune in your mouth, they now have to flow into the stomach. Now, as you got into the stomach, there's a lot of barriers here. So these microorganisms will not just survive in your stomach. That's why our people, our traditional people or our great grandparents did not experience these conditions as much, even though they will lie to us that, you know what, those days there were no technologies to detect Salmonella typhi or to detect brucellosis. These are people who survived on milk. These are people who survived on meat. These are people who survived on water that was just being taken from a stream without having to boil it, and they just drink it, and there was no diarrhea. There were very few cases of diarrhea. They lived longer than we are living now. So when you get into the stomach, there is that thing in the stomach called HCl, hydrochloric acid. One of the mistakes that all of us get involved in is to eat foods that totally mess up that acid in the stomach by either neutralizing it or reducing its production. Now remember that your gut wall has cells that produce this acid. They are not producing that acid for fun. They are producing that acid because it has a reason, it has a role there. And among the roles of that acid in the stomach, because that acid is so strong to an extent that if you ever happen to swallow a blade or a spoon, it will be digested, it will be actually melted because of the reaction of the acid to that spoon. So that acid exists there for a reason. Reason number one, you see there is something here, there is something that closes here so that food goes one direction. This is called a sphincter. So between your esophagus and the stomach, just the junction that the esophagus joins the stomach, there is a sphincter there, some muscle. That sphincter is called the cardiac sphincter. The word cardiac is in relationship to the heart, because remember there are two. There's this one, there's another one that empties the stomach into the small intestine, that is called the pyloric sphincter. This one is the cardiac sphincter, and the reason why this cardiac sphincter is here is to just make sure that food goes in one direction, doesn't come back. So we're already starting to get deeper into it. Look at it this way. Anytime you're traveling and you feel like you want to vomit, that tells you that this sphincter is actually loose and you're actually bringing back the content. Anytime you're pregnant and you're constantly vomiting, it means that your stomach, your womb is pressing against the stomach, and this sphincter is weakening up and then opening up and contents are coming back. Anytime you're experiencing a reflux disease, the GERD, gastroesophageal reflux disorder. Most of you call it hyperacidity. Most of you call it heartburn. Your heart is not burning. It's just the esophagus that's actually being irritated by the acid, the content of the stomach coming back to burn your esophagus. Now remember, this esophagus is lined by cells also that are rapidly multiplying. So therefore, they are not adapted to the strong acid. So if that acid comes back, or even a base, if that acid comes back, it will destroy those epithelial cells. When it destroys it, it exposes the esophagus to more danger, or even to mutations that will actually lead to esophageal cancer. Are we together up to there? So therefore, this sphincter is very important because its role is to make sure that these foods and this content of the stomach are going in one direction and there is no coming back. That is role number one. Now remember, we've said the esophagus does not have mechanisms to protect it from the corrosive contents of the stomach. But remember, the stomach has mechanisms to protect itself from the acid that is being produced by the same stomach wall. So that stomach acid can actually digest even the wall, including pepsin. Pepsin is another one, a protein that can actually become a serious problem to your gut wall. That's why it's produced as pepsinogen, an inactive compound. Anyway, the stomach wall or the gut wall is lined by mucus, is lined by bicarbonates, is lined by water, because again, mucus is just 95% water. And then it's very thick. So it's lined by things that can actually protect it against the acid. So if the acid tries to get in contact with the stomach wall, it gets the bicarbonate. And remember, acid is actually hydrogen ions, H+. And bicarbonate is H3O negative, HO3 negative, sorry. So when the acid gets in contact with these bicarbonates, it's neutralized. So along the stomach wall, we will find mechanisms that will neutralize the stomach acid. Therefore, it will not affect the stomach wall. So when you tell me about hyperacidity, I'm telling you, you are lying, because hyperacidity means excessive production of the acid. There is no way your body will just wake up one day and start producing excess acids. That is not making sense. Acids are produced according to the demand. That is one. Number two, unless you have a gastric tumor, a tumor in the stomach wall that is actually causing excessive production of the acid, there's nothing called hyperacidity. We are going to measure the stomach acid by the concentration, leave alone the volume, the concentration. So as long as it's between the pH of 1 to 3, we are safe because it's strongly acidic. So you see, the gut already protects itself from the acid. Now, if you mess that protection layer of the gut, that's when you suffer gastritis, and then a prolonged gastritis gets you into ulcers. So you've actually thinned that protection layer of the stomach by 1, taking alcohol, by 2, smoking cigarettes, by 3, taking the NSAIDs, non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, the diclofenacs, the brufen, the meloxicams that you people use when you're suffering from menses, that you use when you have arthritis and there's so much back pains and knee pains, that you use when you have an injury, osteoarthritis. So all of them are actually coming in to mess up the stomach wall. That's how they end up causing a problem. Some of them, like aspirin, is actually directly acidic. So it actually destroys the stomach wall directly. And then drugs that are called the steroids, prednisolone used for asthma, hydrocortisone used for allergies, dexamethasone used to actually broaden hips in ladies. All these drugs, they thin that layer, the protection layer of the stomach, and therefore you expose the stomach content to the wall of the stomach, and now you get the ulcer or the gastritis. So gastritis is inflammation of the gut wall. Remember the TIS? Yes. So chronic gastritis will end up leading you into an ulcer. An ulcer is a wound. So for you to heal that wound, the first step is, of course, thicken the stomach wall. The first step is not you going to neutralize the stomach acid. No, the first step is find mechanisms to thicken the stomach wall. And thickening the stomach wall is actually a very, very good way and a natural way of healing the ulcers as compared to neutralizing the acid. Because if you're going to the way of neutralizing the acid, that's how you end up using those antacids and the PPIs. Nexium is part of the PPIs. It's actually esomeprazole. And you know very well that you people, your cars and your offices are full of these things. They are full of these antacids. If they don't have Gaviscon double action, they have Relsagel or Alucid or Nexium or pantoprazole. All of these are actually the PPIs that, one, they block the production of the acid, so they block a biological process. Why would they come in to block the production of the acid when that is a biological process? Unless you have a tumor, and if you have a tumor, there's just need to go and remove the tumor so that we reverse the condition. We don't need to take Nexium. We simply focus on the cause, which is the tumor. We remove the tumor, we are good to go. So therefore, there's nothing like hyperacidity. So stop telling people that, you know what, I have hyperacidity. You don't have hyperacidity. You just have a diet problem. You're a wheat addict. Anyway, so one, that stomach acid helps you digest protein. Remember we said we have HCl in the stomach that is very strong, and it has a role there. Role number 1 is to help you digest protein, because HCl is the one that actually converts pepsinogen to pepsin. So it clips up the pepsinogen, and then you get pepsin, and now that pepsin is the one that actually helps you to chop proteins into smaller amounts. The larger chunks of proteins are chopped into smaller amounts, which we call the polypeptides. And then these polypeptides will go into the small intestines, where they will be further chopped by pancreatic peptidases into amino acids that you absorb. So when you eat meat, you don't absorb meat. And this raises the question, why are we told that red meat is better than white meat? Yet the absorption of the meat is not the red meat you'll absorb amino acids. You'll not absorb fish, you'll absorb amino acids. So why is the red meat a problem? The truth is, red meat has never been a problem. Processed red meat is the problem because it comes with MSG that messes up your gut. Let's keep moving. So one role of that HCl is to destroy, to actually digest protein. Number 2, you see this sphincter? When the acid in the stomach is highly concentrated, very low pH, 1 to 3, that is a signal that is sent through the nerve that is called the vagus nerve into the brain. And the interpretation is, if this acid goes back into your esophagus, you're going to suffer. So what do? Please send a message back to this sphincter so that it closes up so that nothing comes back. Remember that thick layer of the stomach is not the same layer that is lining the esophagus. The esophagus is just epithelial cells. They can be destroyed. So anything that is coming back, whether it's weakly acidic or strongly acidic, will destroy the esophagus. So we must maintain normalcy by closing this sphincter. So if the stomach acid is highly concentrated, the sphincter is totally closed. Are we together up to there? So that is function number 2 of the HCl in the stomach. Close of this sphincter so that you don't ever receive anything coming back. So therefore there will be no gastritis. Not gastritis, esophagitis. There will be no reflux disease. There will be no heartburn. There will be no vomiting, because once you close this sphincter, there's no vomiting. Food goes in one direction. Now at least you can talk about diarrhea, but not vomiting. So those people who always, when you just take a vehicle, you just sit in a vehicle or a public service and a public service vehicle, and then unanusa your roof. When you smell the petrol or the diesel, you are puking, you're vomiting. This is the time for you to actually fix the gut. So those Plasil medication, those metoclopramides and promethazine tablets that you take for motion sickness are not going to come in handy if you have a messed up gut. You will constantly receive the same problem. When you fix the gut, that problem disappears. Is that so hard to do? So that is function number 2. Function number 3. This stomach acid is there for a reason, and that reason is to actually protect you from microorganisms that are coming in through water and through food and also through air. Now remember, we are constantly living with microorganisms in the environment. They never harm us. They're actually there for a reason. God put them there. We even have more of these microorganisms in our stomach or in our gut, and their role is to actually improve our immune system. So when you mess up the concentration of microorganisms in your gut, of course your immunity goes down. And how do you mess it that way? Most women are so good at messing their children's gut by giving them milk formulas, by giving them pasteurized milk, by giving them, there's this water that relieves colic that has sugar. You know it? There's that water that is given to children when they have colic. Instead of just rubbing their back after breastfeeding so that they can actually burp, you end up giving them that fluid. And that fluid has sugar. So you're actually messing up the environment of bacteria in your gut. Yes, Winnie, that's the one that I'm talking about. Yes, Nonza, you're true, you're right. That's the one that I'm talking about. So it has sugar as an ingredient, and that sugar ends up messing up the stomach environment. And now we start having new bacteria developing in the gut of the child, which are not supposed to be there. Remember, in your stomach, you have the acid. So therefore, only bacteria that have adapted to living in acidic environment can actually inhabit the stomach. So if we weaken that stomach acid concentration, what happens is you start growing bacteria that are actually not used to inhabiting an acidic environment. So those that live in basic environment, that in the small intestines, they will now come into the stomach and start affecting the stomach, and that's how we start having these abdominal upsets, diarrhea, indigestion, and all that. So that is function number 3. Is your immune system protects you against gut microorganisms that are coming in with food, water, and air. Now, part of those microorganisms is typhoid, cholera, dysentery, the one that causes dysentery, amoeba, protozoa. All these are coming in with food and water. And the weird part is we cannot live without them, including H. pylori. They are coming in with food and water. So we cannot avoid them because they are there. They are part of our ecosystem, and we need to preserve them anyway because they don't harm us. As long as we are living in a perfect state, they will never harm you.